Well, the world of cricket has been rocked by the sad news of the passing of not just Rod Marsh, but Shane Warne as well within 24 hours. I have the privilege of being able to speak to Ricky Ponting, who knew him very, very well. Ricky, sorry for your loss. It's something that still hasn't quite sunk in. It doesn't feel real. I don't know how you're feeling.
Yeah, thanks, Ish. Yeah, you're exactly right there. I mean, it's having to, I guess, confront the passing of two of my closest friends, I guess, and people that I spent a lot of my time with in the game of cricket. With dealing with Rod on Friday morning, and we'd sort of known about Rod for near on a week before he actually passed, and then even Friday, I got to the point where I was sort of too scared to look at my phone and pick my phone up, and then it was the same thing on Saturday morning. I woke up nice and early. I was getting the kids ready to go to netball, and then Rihanna just happened to look at her phone and said that, and told me the news about Warne, and I just sort of grabbed the phone out of her hand straight away and sort of couldn't believe it, And it's probably still the same now, to be honest. I mean, it's over 24 hours, I guess now, but I spoke, did a couple of news crosses and things yesterday, and it was still just so raw to me then that I really couldn't speak. Every time I thought about him and our experiences and our journey together, it just sort of got me, and I got sort of short for words. So, and it'll probably be the same at some stage today as well. The more that we talk about him, the more that people are talking about Warne over the next couple of weeks. The thing that will shine through is just how loyal and how good a friend he was to everybody that he loved, and everybody loved him. That was the thing about it. He just had this energy about him that sort of drew you to him. If you were in a room, you wanted to go and stand next to him and talk to him, and that's a trait that not a lot of people have, I guess. But it was one of his strengths.
Yeah, he had an incredible magnetism. That's why everyone wanted to be mates with him and wanted to be him almost. But the last time I saw him was at the Sydney Test in person, and he was getting quite excited about this new challenge of potentially putting his hand up to want to try and coach England. I don't know if that's something that he spoke to you about.
No, he didn't, because I would have tried to talk him out of it pretty quick. No, I think he had a pretty good idea of things to talk to me about and not talk to me about. Like that was one thing he wouldn't talk to me about. I mean, another thing, a famous, not famous, but a chat that we probably should have had that we didn't have was actually involving the SCG as well. When after the Perth Test in 06-07. He made his mind up that he was going to retire, and I had a bit of a sense that it was going to happen, and he started making his way towards me one of the training days leading into the Sydney Test, and I just knew what was coming, and I said, "No, stop. I don't want to hear this. You're not going to talk to me, because I'm going to try and talk you out of it, and I don't want to do that." So, but I knew what it was all about, and that was about his retirement. So, yeah, I think there's a couple of things there that Shane probably knew better than to try and talk to me about, but I mean, I think the thing about him as well, and you've known him, I think I've read 6 years now, Isham, worked alongside him for a long time. His passion for the game and his knowledge for the game is something to behold. He would have made a great coach. I know he's done a little bit of it in the 100, but if it was going to, having someone to take over an England cricket team now, someone like Shane Warne, I think would have done a terrific job. He's a huge loss to the world game. It's simple as that. Whether he would have done some coaching or even just the way that he talks about and the insights he gives through his commentary, I think we're all going to miss that.
When someone passes away, you start talking about the memories and eventually when you go through the grieving process, you become quite pragmatic about the situation, and you're just grateful to have known that person and to have spent time with that person. But with Warne, it's crazy to think that all that information is now gone. The information that was accrued over his lifetime about cricket, which is why I guess we're so lucky that he was so giving in wanting to hand out that information. You would have seen him with plenty of leg spinners, but just players around the world. Whenever they wanted to ask him a question, he was like an oracle. He was happy to feed out that information.
Yeah, look, there's absolutely no doubt about that. But saying that, I don't think he left too much in his head. Whenever he had something he wanted to talk about, he made sure he got that out there and did it in such a great way. It was an educational way. That was what he was. He was a teacher, wasn't he? Through his commentary, as you say, his time and what he was willing to give up. I've seen 1,000 photos the last 24 hours of all those young spinners that he's worked with. Steve Smith in his early days when he played, Rashid Khan a couple of years ago, catching up and talking leg spin, those two together. Imagine the conversation that they would have had. And Rashid's been a reasonable bowler for a long time now, but I bet he walked away with that with a greater understanding and knowledge of leg spin bowling. So, yeah, look, it's it's up to us now. I guess the us that are here that have still got that great passion for the game and can talk about the game. It's up to us to carry on, Shane's legacy that he left on the game. And as you said, I've known him for a long time, and I think I understood him pretty well. So it's up to me now whenever I get an opportunity just to let the world know what he was all about, what he was like, and hopefully be able to pass on to other people some of his knowledge that and some of the things that I probably learned from him as well.
You tweeted he was the greatest bowler that you played with or against. Can you just describe why he was so good and why he was so difficult to combat?
Well, he was so good because he wanted to be. That's the thing. He wasn't scared of an occasion. He wasn't scared of an opponent. He thrived on those bigger moments, the bigger stage. It was his, when he had the ball in his hand, it was like we were all just part of the show. And he loved that. He was always, some of the things he'd say pre-game leading into a test match wasn't always easy for me as captain, because I'd have to pick up some of the pieces of the things he had to say the day before the game. But he just had this. He had a presence. He almost intimidated opposition teams and opposition batsmen into almost being scared of facing him. And you think back through the time that he played, the guys that had the most success against him were the guys that tried to put it back on him and tried to be really aggressive against him. You think of a Tendulkar and a Lara and Peterson and Flintoff, these types of guys. They were the ones that really stood up and weren't just happy to be a part of the show. They wanted to put their own show on. But look, Warne, I've heard him described before as the most natural unnatural, because that's what leg spin bowling is bowling in itself is such an unusual action. When you've got the ball coming out of the back of your hand, it's a different story again. So his ability to, as I said, thrive on the big moments, intimidate batsmen, but more importantly, be able to execute his skill as well as he did over such a long period of time through his injuries and his fingers and his shoulder and his elbow. He'd constantly be having work done on his forearm and his elbow to get right to play the game. But his level of skill for such an unnatural movement was remarkable.
What struck me when I read his book was that he would always make sure he called his family. If there were any issues with any of his relationships, he would always make sure he would call everyone, make sure everything was okay before he took to the field to play for Australia.
Yeah, even he was unique in his own way with things like that. Even a lot of the personal issues that he was going through and dealing with. I'll never forget on the eve of the 2005 Ashes when it looked like his marriage was about to break down back here in Australia, and I was actually quite worried about him and how he was going to handle that, and understanding how big a player he was going to be for us in that series in 2005. And I think it was 2 days before the first test. I spoke to him that night and said, "Mate, I need to have breakfast with you in the morning. I need to catch up with you and just have a chat to you about where everything's at, where your life's at and where cricket's at." And he sort of said, you could tell then that he was reluctant to want to sit down. But I finally got him at breakfast the next morning and started this chat about, I was worried about him and not just his cricket, but his life at home. And he basically stopped me mid-sentence and said, "Mate, what are you talking about? Like, I'll deal with all of this stuff. I'll get all this stuff done. And I'll guarantee you when the first ball is to be bowled of the first test match, you won't even know that anything is up." And you look back at that series, that was probably the greatest series that he had in his career, once again with the ball, but I think he was our third or fourth leading run scorer in that series as well. And I think I read a quote from Warne the other day. Warne said something that he thought if Warne wasn't a part of that series, England might have won that series 4-1.
You mentioned the 2005 Ashes, took over 40 wickets across that series, and that was astonishing because of where he was out in the lead up to that particular series as well. Terry Jenner came over and he spent some time with him in the nets, spent 2 or 3 hours in the nets, I think, with him the evening before day one. And that set him on his way again. But I actually just want to go back to the famous Ashes Test match in 2006, an amazing Adelaide. And what was it that made Shane Warne stand out in situations like that?
I think you probably used a word earlier. It was that belief that he had in himself and his ability, regardless of where the game was at or the situation of the game. That was the thing. I mean, he knew that he had more skill than most, and he knew he could deliver under pressure. And most people, and I would say most people that play international sport or high level sport, they don't have that. Some of them come across with a lot of bravado and it looks like they've got a lot of belief, but not to the level that Warney did. And that game, that was, when you look back to what happened in the first innings, I think England got about 600 or over 600, and the whole chatter around the media from day one was that this is going to go back to '05 again. This England team is really good. Australia can't win from here. And I remember having a chat with the guys. I think it was day 2 of the game, out the back in the nets before we started our batting innings, of which Warney was a bit of a part of as well. And we basically said forget about all this stuff. If we play our best cricket from now to the end of this game in Adelaide, we can absolutely win the game. And when it came for the game being on the line and we needed someone to stand up with the ball, to get the big wickets that he got and just put on a show again and give us a chance to win a Test match was what set him apart from every other bowler that I played. As I said in the social media stuff yesterday, every other bowler that I played with or against, there was something special about Warney.
Yeah, he was a true icon of the game, and he just brought everyone with him. But also just such an inspiration to people watching as well. I mean, myself as a youngster growing up and watching Shane Warne and yourself and that whole era of Australian cricket, you wanted to take that back to your own game. And I think that is the knock-on effect and the legacy that Shane Warne left with any team that he was part of.
When we were travelling the world or when we were travelling around Australia, the Australian cricket team would do coaching clinics wherever we could. And when Shane was there, every kid at that coaching clinic wanted to bowl leg spin. Everyone, you mentioned it earlier, everyone wanted to be Shane Warne. And that's only, that wasn't only in Australia. There would have been, boys and girls in England growing up wanting to be Shane Warne as well, and India and places like that. That's the impact he had on the game. And, just thinking how big he was in the scheme of world sport, signing that big Nike contract when he did and going over and hanging out with Michael Jordan. And, it's just that stuff doesn't happen in cricket. He was a star. He's just an absolute superstar. Don't forget about what he did on the field. The star power, I guess, that he brought to the game. The game was always better when Warney was a part of it. Whether that's and we're going to notice that, I think pretty soon. Even we'll notice it with his commentary not being there, and even today. I've had the television on this morning and watching a lot of the tributes to him. But anytime I hear his voice, I have to turn it off.
Yeah, it's. I keep hearing his voice actually. What would you say is that the lasting impact Warney will have on you and what you do in the rest of your career as well?
The lasting impact, I think I spoke a bit about yesterday, just now reflection on how lucky we were to be able to spend a lot of time with him, play a lot of cricket with him. He gave me my nickname as a 15-year-old when we were at the cricket academy. I was over there, just left Launceston, straight out of year 10. He was over there just about to embark on his first tour with the Australian cricket team. And I think there was a few similarities, I think, between us two. We both had a bit of menace and a bit of rascal in us, and I think that's probably why we got on so well at such a young age. I think, as I said, 15, so I've known him for 30 odd years, and he hadn't changed much. That rascal was still inside of him there, and that menace was still in him, but he had a very good understanding of the bigger picture things and what was happening around him in the world, certainly with people that were close to him anyway.
You talked about speaking to him a couple of weeks ago and the loyalty that he showed to a lot of his teammates and his friends and people around him. On reflection, if you could say something to him now, what would it be?
I think, like I've said to a lot of the guys that I've been talking to the last couple of days, just how much you love them, I guess. I didn't say that. I wish I did.
I'm sorry for your loss, Ricky. He would have known that, you know. Like, you wouldn't have needed to say it to him. He would have just known how you felt about him. Ricky, thank you very much for your time. I guess, look, it's been a difficult few days, and yeah, I just wish you all the best in the coming weeks and in trying to get your head around all of this.
Yeah, look, I think, yeah, as I said, it's just a bit raw just yet. I mean, I tried to stay away from it as much as I could yesterday. I think, you know, a big part of this now is how we look after one another, how we look after each other going forward. There's chat groups going on and everything on my phone, and you know, as I said, I couldn't really front up to a lot of that yesterday, but you know, I think once we get today out of the way and a lot of us old guys and start connecting again and I think it's time to start celebrating a bit as well. You know, well, it will be in when it's not quite as raw. You know, there'll be all sorts of things that we'll be talking about and stories that we'll be telling about Warne, which, you know, that'll be the, you know, reliving some of the great times again, which I think is hard to do now. And as I said, even me listening to his voice is hard to do. But I think in a couple of days it'll be, I'll want to do that again. You know, I'll want to watch a lot of his highlights packages and montages and the things that you talked about to remember him.